Should pole dancing be an Olympic sport? That is the question on a lot of people's minds at the moment because, of course, the Olympic Games are happening right now. So it has come up as a topic of conversation in the pole community in general. There have been a lot of people talking about it recently, and I want to share my 2 cents on it. So let's get into it. First, if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Caitlin Rawson. I am a pole dancer, a competitive pole dancer. I've competed many times at the South African National Championships. I've also competed at the IPSF World Championships a number of times. I'm the current world record holder and gold medalist for the Parapole PPM 1 division, and I will be competing again at the IPSF World Champs this year, this time in the flying pole artistic division. I have a whole other video series about that. But anyway, that's me, and I say that just to let you know that I am a little bit biased on that. In addition to actually competing myself, and I would maybe hopefully one day like to be able to have the opportunity to compete for pole dancing at the Olympics, I am also a member of the South African National Pole Sports Federation's committee, and I have also consulted with the IPSF on their Parapole committee. So I am very much personally invested in this. I do come into this conversation with a little bit of bias, but I think it's important to have these conversations and discuss this because I've seen a lot of really interesting perspectives recently. So, do I think that pole should be an Olympic sport? If you haven't guessed already, I do believe that yes, it should be an Olympic sport. I'm going to go over the reasons why I think that, and then I'm also going to talk about some of the talking points that I've been seeing recently about why some people who don't think it should be an Olympic sport have been saying that it shouldn't be, and what I think about those opinions. So, first off, I would like pole to be an Olympic sport because I would like to one day maybe have the opportunity to compete in the Olympics. I think it's just such a cool dream to have, and this is purely from a selfish personal perspective. I know what a huge honor it has been to be able to compete at the national championships, to compete at the world championships, what that sort of competition experience has done for me in terms of my growth as an athlete and as a person. And I can only imagine how incredible it must be to be an Olympic athlete, to know that you're representing your country on possibly the biggest stage in the world for your sport. And I just think that would be such a cool opportunity. So personally, I want the chance to maybe one day be able to do that. And that's why I am quite invested in the idea of pole one day becoming an Olympic sport. Like I said, I am part of the SAPSF committee, and the IPSF, in collaboration with all the federations, has been working and really trying to push for this to happen, for pole to become an Olympic sport. They're trying to increase the number of federations, get more local federations, national federations having national competitions so that we can meet the requirements for pole to actually be considered to officially be an Olympic sport. The moment the IPSF has observer status as a potential Olympic sport, which is really cool, but there's still a long way to go with that. But yeah, so the first reason is just basically personally, I would like that. I would appreciate that opportunity. And I think there's many people who would also really, really appreciate that opportunity. The second reason why I would like pole to become an Olympic sport is a less selfish reason. So even if I didn't get the chance to go to the Olympics for pole dancing, I would still want it to become an Olympic sport because I think it could do such incredible things for the visibility, the growth of our sport. At the moment, pole is still a pretty niche sport. It is growing and growing every single day, and more people are aware of it and know about it and have an idea of what it entails, but it's still pretty niche. There's not a lot of opportunities for pole dancers. It's quite difficult to, especially as a competitive pole dancer, one who's competing, to fund yourself, those sorts of things. So I think that just in terms of the growth of the visibility of the sport would be such a important and monumental opportunity. Imagine people being able to turn on the TV and see pole dancing on the TV, not having to go to a YouTube live stream link of a competition. That would be such an incredible thing, and I think would just bring even more awareness to the incredibly talented people that we have competing in our sport. I believe that there are so many athletes that work so hard to be the absolute best that they can be in terms of competitive pole dancing, and for them to be able to have the opportunity to have that recognized by a wider audience, by a more global audience, a broader audience than just only those who are already interested in pole would be such an incredible opportunity, and I really hope that that's something that we can achieve someday, even if it's not necessarily through the Olympics. And then in terms of funding, there's a couple different avenues for this. So like pole competitions in general are very, very expensive to run. Like I said, I've been on the committee for the SAPSF. I know a little bit about the inner workings of actually putting on a competition of a certain scale and standard. And to run a good competition, it is very, very expensive. And that means that sponsors are often going to be required. But at the moment, it's really, really difficult to get funding for like sponsors for competitors, sponsors for the actual competitions themselves, etc. So just in terms of like increasing the visibility will also lead to an increase of potential opportunities for sponsors. Sponsors may be more willing to come on board because pole is more visible as a sport. And I think that'll be only like a good thing for growth and investment into the sport, into the community, to then even encourage more people to be doing pole as a sport and coming into it and learning about what a like fantastic like community, what a fantastic opportunity pole sports can be. And then the other thing in terms of funding is, I think that if pole made it to the Olympics and was considered an Olympic sport, you would see more people wanting to start to learn and more people being aware of it, coming into studios. That would only be beneficial for studios, who then would have more people coming in wanting to pick up pole as a hobby or as a like competitive sport. That would be great for the studios, which then have more demand and they can increase their revenues, hopefully. And then also from a coaching perspective, it creates a whole broader industry in terms of that market for coaches for competitive athletes. I, as someone who competes in the World Championships and also coaches for national and world championships, the students that I have that I am coaching on a consistent basis in the run-up to national championships and world championships, that is a vital part of my income stream as a pole teacher and as a coach, etc. And if I didn't have that, like I would be in a much more precarious financial position. So I can only imagine how much that would have the potential to grow if pole then became an Olympic sport. It would get more people interested in competing in things like national championships and world championships to then hopefully then go to the Olympics, etc. So I think from a coaching instructor studio perspective, I can only see that that would increase demand, increase growth, and increase the kind of number of people and the amount of money coming into the sport from that perspective as well. So it's the funding thing is like for me kind of twofold. It's not only are you hopefully going to be getting more visibility, which leads to more like sponsorship opportunities for athletes and for competitions, but then also hopefully you'll see studios and coaches benefiting from the fact that more people will be coming into the sport, more people will be wanting coaching for competitions both nationally, internationally, and potentially at the Olympic level, and that will bring more budget and funding into those studios. And then I've kind of touched on this aspect already, but like I just think there are so many incredible pole athletes that work so hard and like really put so much into their craft, that to have the opportunity to be on that like same platform, there are pole dancers that have insane levels of talent, probably comparable to a lot of what you would see in like diving or gymnastics. Obviously these are like different skill sets, but just so like as like a standard of comparison, you have pole dancers that are definitely on that same level of athleticism, of technique, of skill, ability, etc. And just for them to be able to get that recognition, be on a global stage like that of the Olympics, have the opportunity to represent their countries, win Olympic gold medals, like I just think that that's such a beautiful opportunity that we shouldn't be not wanting to push for that, for the athletes to have that opportunity, is my opinion. Now, I know not everyone agrees with me on those points of why pole should be in the Olympics, and instead some people have some very strong opinions as to why they feel pole should not be in the Olympics. So I want to talk through just a couple of the points that I've seen people raise. The first one, and I think one of the most common ones that I've seen, is that people are saying that it will further strip pole away from its roots of coming from the industry of strippers and sex workers, and that it will move pole away from that, and that we should be trying to avoid that. And while I 100% agree that we should be trying to, maintain the knowledge and the history of pole as coming from strippers, as coming from sex workers and that industry, and that we should not try and distance ourselves from that, we must always remember that part of pole dancing's history. I can see why people would be worried about pole going to the Olympics becoming more focused on the sport side of things, and that potentially creating that further distancing and further kind of stigmatization of the origins of pole. But I think that it would provide a good opportunity to make the history and the origins of pole more like mainstream, more accepted, and less stigmatized, if that makes sense. I think it depends on how you approach it. Like, I can definitely see there being a path where we get pole to the Olympics and it does completely like distance itself from the history, and like there's stigmatism of that. But then I also see the path where we could like try and not do that, if you know what I mean. And of course, this will be difficult. I mean, like, even without pole being in the Olympics, you already see like studios that are trying to distance themselves from the heritage of and the history of pole. You already have people who will use the like hashtag not a stripper hashtag on Instagram and stuff. Like, it's not that this is like pole getting to the Olympics would create this problem. It could maybe potentially exacerbate it slightly, but I think we already as a community at large are so conscious of this fact that I feel like we could make a concerted effort to not stigmatize the history of pole and to not try and create that distance. I think that yes, there is a risk, but I also think that we could try and use this more as an opportunity for growth and an opportunity for destigmatization of the history of pole and really bringing it to a more mainstream audience and to the forefront. The other thing that I've seen is that pole getting to the Olympics would destroy the different styles of pole that currently exist, and that it would all just become focused on pole sports and the very like athletic gymnastic side of pole, and that there wouldn't be as much emphasis on artistry, on flow, on heels techniques, on all the different other aspects and styles of pole that exist. And I just don't see this happening. I think the pole community is so diverse, and there's so much that is able to coexist within one space within the pole community, that it doesn't have to be like, oh, if we decide that we're going to push for pole to become an Olympic sport, or so even just certain parts of the community want pole to become an Olympic sport and it gets to the Olympic, that then that's the only path that becomes available, that pole sports then is the only way forward. I definitely see that there is like these different categories, but I think there's room for all of it to coexist. There are so many different sides of pole that you can embrace. Like, for me, like, I love pole sports. Like, I find competing in pole sports to be such a joy, and I really, really enjoy that competitive aspect of it, the very like strict requirements, the rules. Like, I personally love that aspect, and that is probably the aspect that would like be taken forward to the Olympics. But it doesn't mean that I hate all of the other aspects of pole and don't want that. Like, at my studio, like, I teach heels flow classes. Like, I love that flow heels aspect of pole as well, and I don't think it has to be like we have to choose one or the other. Of course, with the IPSF, and that's kind of the organization pushing for pole to get into the Olympics, they are only going to focus on pole sport, and they also have pole art. They have artistic divisions, but that doesn't mean that if that's the kind of two aspects that get to the Olympics, that all of the other aspects have to fall away. There is no reason why there can't still be heels competitions, heels classes, studios that more focus on that. It doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. On a similar note, I've seen people saying that pole will just become a place for like ex-gymnasts to fulfill their fantasies and their dreams of going to the Olympics, and beginners will be pushed out of the sport, and like along that same line of the other styles will be pushed out of the sport, that it'll just become a place for ex-gymnasts and it'll be only focused on the competitive aspects. And I just don't think that's true. I think what it will do is, if getting to the Olympics hopefully creates the growth in the community that we would want to see, the growth in the industry that we would want to see, that it's only just going to create more room for different niches within pole to establish themselves. So yes, you might have studios that are then going to kind of become established, that are very competition focused, that are going to attract those ex-gymnasts that really want to push to get to the Olympics, that are going to compete at all the national championships and world championships and really have that goal of getting to the Olympics. And maybe that type of studio is not going to be for everyone. Maybe a brand new beginner who's just wanting to come in and pick it up as a hobby and is no interested in taking it seriously or competitively in any sense, that's not going to be the studio for them. But it doesn't mean that there won't be studios that maybe don't cater so much to the competition aspect. We already have that at the moment, at least in South Africa. There are studios here that are very, very focused on competition. The studio that I go to, the coach that I train with, she is incredibly focused on the competitive sports aspect of pole, as well as artistic pole for IPSF and SAPSF competitions. And that's why I go to, is because that's what I'm interested. So it works because that's what my needs are, and that's the studio that I choose to go to and coach that I choose to train with, because that fits together. But there are studios in South Africa that are not focused on competitions at all, that it's way more focused on the heels and the flow and the dance elements and just building confidence and perfect for beginners. All of that can coexist, and there's different demographics and different target markets that will want and appreciate both of those aspects. I don't think we have to limit it and say, well, pole can't be in the Olympics because then it will only be this. We can say, well, yes, if pole gets to the Olympics, that's great, and maybe we'll see a growth in that aspect of the pole community and there'll be more interest there. But hopefully what will happen as well, like I mentioned in I think a little bit earlier in the video, is that you'll have the growth in that, and that growth will then trickle to the other side, where maybe people will see pole on the TV for the Olympics and see, oh, that looks really cool. Maybe there's a studio near me where I can pick it up and try it as a hobby. I've seen this kind of idea of people saying it's oh, it's going to push beginners out of the sport. I actually think the opposite would happen. Just because something exists at an Olympic level doesn't mean that beginners can't do it. And I think people would understand that. For example, marathon runners. There are marathon runners at the Olympics. Not everyone who watches the marathon runners at the Olympics thinks, oh, I can never do a marathon now. There are so many people who do running, who do 5Ks, 10Ks, whatever, marathons as a hobby, a fun thing that they do on the weekends and don't take it very competitively or very seriously. I think the same thing that could happen with pole. It's just going to be, hopefully we would have more visibility and more new people, more beginners coming into pole as a result of it having that extra visibility and that extra awareness. I think I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second, but yeah, I just don't think that there is much merit to the idea that it will become purely a sport for ex-gymnasts and purely a industry and community that's only focused on the sports aspect, and that beginners will be excluded and not welcomed. I think that of course there will be studios, maybe there will be certain studios that have a vibe like that, where beginners don't feel very welcome and don't feel included, and obviously that's not ideal. You want everyone to feel included and welcome everywhere. But at the same time, there are going to be different places that are going to be best for different people. Different studios are going to work for different goals, different needs, different standards. And hopefully you could have a situation where if a beginner walks into a studio that's very, very competitive and very focused on that aspect, they could then maybe be recommended or directed away from that studio towards a studio that's going to be able to more cater for what they want for pole as a hobby. And I think even that could potentially exist within the same studio. There's no reason that you can't have the more competitive aspects existing in the studio at the same time as also being accommodating for beginners classes. So I just don't see that beginners are going to be pushed out of the sport. I see that maybe potentially people who are ex-gymnasts are going to want to then come into the sport to have their chance to make it into the Olympics with pole sports. But I think you already have that to a certain extent at the moment. A lot of ex-gymnasts, ex-dancers, people from other movement professions come into pole as a hobby and an outlet, and some want to take it competitively and some don't want to take it competitively. And although there may be some areas in which these ex-gymnasts have a comparative advantage to someone who's come in with no previous gymnastics background, there are also things that they might not necessarily have an advantage in, or where other people of other backgrounds might be more suited. There are going to be previous gymnasts who come in and do phenomenally in pole, and there might be previous gymnasts who come in and don't actually do that well in pole and decide that it's not for them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with someone who was a gymnast coming into pole and finding that they really enjoy it and they really want to do take it seriously and compete with it and potentially go to the Olympics. I don't think there's an issue with that, as long as there is still the room and the space in the community at different studios for people of all walks of life who want to try pole. Then the last point I saw came specifically from Dan Rosen, and I disagree with this point, but basically he was saying that the pole industry has already changed so much over the years, and that by introducing the pole to the Olympics, that basically the big names that we know now will completely disappear, and it'll be taken over by people that you have never heard of, that are like doing like crazy, insane flexibility and strength tricks and dynamic movements and whatever. And I just think that this is like maybe like not a great way to look at it, because as like an industry and as a community, why would we not want to grow and expand beyond just the like 10 big names that existed in the beginning? Because Dan specifically mentioned, like in the beginning of the pole community, there were like 10 big names and that was all people knew. But like, why should we be held to that standard and that idea forever? Why would we not want growth in the community? Why would we not want more people to have the opportunity to experience being a big name in the industry? I think it's just a little bit of a resistance to change. It's like those like people, that the 10 people that were like really big in the beginning of the pole community, like I don't think we should forget about those people, but I think we can create space and room for new people to come up and to like be celebrated for their talents and their achievements. If someone is like a 10-year-old Ukrainian child, like Dan mentioned in his post, that is doing like crazy, insane, amazing tricks, why should they not be celebrated for that? Why can we not like also see that as an inspiration in a different way to how we see the pioneers of the industry as inspirations? Like the pioneers of the pole industry will always be those OGs, those pioneers, and we should always kind of like defer respect to that, and the fact that they came up in like a sport that was even more taboo, like an industry that was even more taboo than it is now, where people didn't really understand it. Like the challenges of starting pole in those very, very early days, it must have been so much more like difficult finding studios when there were hardly any studios. Like I think we should celebrate that, and like those OG legends should always be kind of like appreciated for that. And I think like, you know, telling people, keeping their names like alive within the community is a good way to do that. I don't think trying to prevent anyone else from coming up and establishing themselves and establishing a name for themselves in the community is the way to do that. I think in any community, in any industry, there's going to be growth, there's going to be change over time. The big names in gymnastics from like decades ago are not the same big names now. It's like things are going to change and evolve over time, and I think we should celebrate that and celebrate that growth, that it shows that there is growth of the industry, that we now have these new names coming up and we can see different styles, different aspects represented, different people from all different places in the world represented in the community. And I think I just struggle to see why there's an issue with that growth and for new names coming up in the industry. I don't think that that's ever something that we should be fighting against. I think there's one thing to be said for preserving the history and preserving those kind of like the knowledge of those pioneers of the industry. I definitely think we should do that, but I don't think that that has to come at the expense of saying that like, okay, well, we can't have any new names coming up in the industry. We can't be celebrating new talents and new expressions and new kind of achievements because we have to be stuck in the past. Anyway, I think my main takeaway is that the avenue of pole getting to the Olympics and that kind of like sports avenue of pole and aerial, that doesn't have to take away from any of the other aspects of pole. And I think my main overall point is just that there can be coexistence of, yes, there is an avenue, there is a more sports side focus of pole that is pushing for that journey to get to the Olympics, and that can grow at the same time as other avenues and other aspects of pole can grow. The heels, the sexy styles, the like flow styles, all of those different aspects. I don't think that one has to grow at the expense of the other. I think one of the things that I love about pole so much is that it is such a broad and diverse community in terms of not just the people within it, the types of people who do pole, but also the various different styles. There's kind of like a niche that everyone can find, people establishing and creating their own new styles, combining things. I feel like that's always been such a positive aspect of the pole community and something that I loved so much. And I don't think that we have to, like, pole getting to the Olympics would have to destroy all the other aspects and sides of pole. I definitely think there is room for coexistence, and hopefully pole getting to the Olympics and the pole sports avenue growing can also encourage the growth of all the other aspects of the pole community. I don't think it necessarily has to be an either or. So yeah, that's my thoughts on pole at the Olympics. Like I said, I overall think that it would be a positive thing. yes, there may be like risks to the sanitization of the sport and the community, but I think that if we as a community are conscious of that, and those that have been around for longer really like try and preserve the heritage and the history of the sport, that we can have the best of both worlds, to quote Hannah Montana, and have a path for kind of everyone and all the different people who might want to experience the pole community. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Let me know if you agree with me or disagree with me in the comments. I feel like there's going to be like some good healthy debate on this topic for a while now that the Olympics are going on. I definitely do understand the perspective of those who like have concerns and have reservations about pole going to the Olympics, but yeah, it would be a dream of mine to go to the Olympics, so I'm gonna keep pushing for it. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there anything that I didn't mention that I should have mentioned? Let me know down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was thought-provoking in some way, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.